answered my question. My first question I was going to ask was, if there's someone who's not familiar with functional medicine, how do you describe it? Or actually, how does it differ, let's say, from conventional medicine? Because most MEN1 patients at the moment that I know anyway will only have had exposure to conventional medicine via their standard NHS care. What is it about functional medicine that differs from conventional medicine?
Well, it's pretty much different. And by the way, there is a book around that, which is Introduction to Functional Medicine, and that one is in French and in English, and it was translated in English. It's a much smaller book. It's a pretty cheap pocket book, okay, but with all the basics, and it was translated with the help of my nutritionist for 18 years, I think, Glenn Matten, who's quite good at French and especially articulate and knowledge in English, which is the goal. And we did that together. So that could be useful, and there's a way to obtain that at least through my website or through you. You probably could help people, because that gives the much more detailed explanations and some interesting examples beyond what I can say now. But what I can say now is that this is a natural medicine, not so much different from what you could call nutritional medicine. Some people would rather name it integrative medicine. Integrative, well, I think I have a French accent today, worse than normal. Integrative medicine, because in the US, sometimes you find that as well. So basically, it's rather natural medicine, but not exclusively. We do not exclude drugs, but that's not the first thing we would think about to help patients. Sometimes you have to, especially on short courses, because, there is, I'm absolutely adamant that there are merits to give a chemical molecule to help people on an acute phase. The idea is to give that for a few days, a week, maybe a few weeks, well, maybe a good example I could give, because this is super, super popular, is the use of proton pump inhibitors. Is the omeprazole family. There's a lot of prazole, endings there. You have a lot of competing molecules which do more or less all the same thing, which is block the secretion of stomach acid. And that was invented, I remember, because I was either at the medical school at the Belgian uni, I think I was, or maybe it came soon after I finished my studies. I forgot a bit, but I was in my early years then. And it was pretty miraculous drug, because it would heal about any stomach or duodenal ulcer in 2 months, if not in 1. Guaranteed of a healing, because you would suppress stomach acid, so the wound there, the injury would heal. And that was, of course, a major progress, almost life-saving sometimes, because if that bleeds like crazy, it is a serious condition to suffer from an ulcer, a bleeding ulcer. But nowadays, decades down the road, you have millions of people in the UK, but of course here in Europe as well. I hope you don't mind that I say Europe and UK as two different things now, because it's a bit what has happened. And those people, those poor people, are given this drug basically forever, because it seems that it's the only way that either gastroenterologists or GPs can help them with heartburn or reflux or whatever the name you give to that. Some people, they just cough or they have a sore throat and you give that, it's all suppressing the stomach acid and that's it. But if we as humans are equipped with stomach acid, well, that's for a reason. You know, it's a very difficult secretion to achieve. If well, we could easily do it. You don't see it, but I'm here on a very thick old wooden desk, you know, looks super solid. Nothing will break that, except if the house crumbles in an earthquake. So you would think that would resist to some secretion coming from a human body. But if you would, you know, organize some things so that we could extract some of my stomach acid and let it drop, you know, on the desk by some aspiration, let's imagine, that would go through the wooden desk pretty quickly. And of course, here's not the case because my ceiling would not suffer, but if you are on a wooden floor, it would go through the floors. That's the kind of thing we make in the stomach, you know. It's extremely acid, extremely acid. It doesn't go more acidic than that. So if we bother to make that, don't you think we need it? I mean, what the hell would be the goal? To create that difficult fluid, very special fluid for nothing. And of course, we needed to digest. We needed to break down the proteins. We needed to activate digestive enzymes, which are secreted in a non-activated form that has to be activated by stomach acid. We needed to kill the bugs, to clean off what we eat, which is full of potentially harmful bacteria, yeast, protozoan, you name it. Okay, so of course we need stomach acid, but you can't keep that because that is what is behind your heartburn. And indeed, if you stop it, there's no heartburn because there's a link. But you know, what you need to do is to find the reason for the heartburn and fix it. And that's the solution. But to remove stomach acid because the acid hurts you because of some dysfunction in the area, well, it's exactly if you start recommending to your patients who complain about chronic headache to behead them. Why don't we behead them? You know, fixed, no headache. It's the same absurdity. So this is an example of the difference between functional medicine and, of course, the connection with intestinal health, because if you fix your intestinal health, which means if you fix your diet, because that's a big link, and to fix the diet doesn't mean to apply a magic Dr. Mouton's diet, which does not exist at all, okay? It's to personalize the diet according who you are with a number of tests and rules and logic. There's a complex logic behind that, all to individualize the diet. If the diet is well individualized and well respected, but there's no reflux, there's no heartburn. Okay, and I can tell you, I don't have. There's always an exception to any big statement. Maybe one or two for some. You know, sometimes there are some good reasons, but 99% of my patients who were initially on PPIs, proton pump inhibitors, have stopped, have managed to stop. It may take months, if not years, and especially to decrease progressively because you have a rebound effect when you stop, because the body says, I've been deprived of this precious fluid, now I need to make much more. So in fact, when you stop the PPI, you secrete much more acid. So it's horrible. It's very difficult to stop. But if you are patient and hard-headed and full of motivation, which I guarantee I'm going to inflict to my patients to stop that nonsense. Yeah, you get there. They don't take this thing anymore, and they don't have this heartburn. They probably have a better digestive health all in all because of things being addressed at the root. So basically, it's more, and you understand that to fix this heartburn, rather than giving one chemical molecule, you have to do a lot of things, okay? So it's more holistic, but it's more complex. You could call it more comprehensive if you want. You need to be more motivated rather than just swallowing a tablet. You need, it costs money because PPIs are free because, you know, they are not free. They are paid by your tax and by your debt, by the state's debt, which, so they are not free, but this seem to be free. And of course, a functional assessment to fix a tough case like that, because somebody who's on PPIs for 10 years, it's not easy to solve, but we solve it almost 100% if the patient really is part of the team. So you team more with the patient. All the recommendations are more natural, okay? They are less risky because, you know, the side effects of drugs and the medical mistakes, you know, can be really challenging, if not deadly. Everybody knows that. It happens, unfortunately. I heard about a case this morning, again, not for my patients, but just related to one of my patients. Severe, you know, malpractice because, you know, when you, I thought about an analogy to interact with that patient, and I thought about an analogy, and I came to this suggestion. It's very fresh. I thought about that minutes ago. If you are traveling with, you know, dynamite, but there's some nitroglycerin. Is that something? Nitroglycerin, is it familiar? Well, you have things that are even more drastic and more modern, you know, that they use in these big bombings, you know, terrorist bombings, just a small amount. But if you travel with that, you're more at risk of an incident than if you travel, you know, with the little things that small kids use, I don't know, at a carnival or Christmas, you know, to make a little bit of noise. Well, in between, you will see fireworks. Fireworks can be dangerous, okay? But then I'm not even mentioning fireworks. I'm mentioning, you know, little things, perhaps a bit old-fashioned now, because I'm old-fashioned, obviously, being old. But these, you know, that make more noise than more harm, compared to drugs, which, of course, if the dosage is wrong, if the patient misunderstood the instructions, or if the prescription was just wrong, you know, and sometimes there's a mix of drugs that don't go together. Enfin, so there's a lot of potential risks when you play with dangerous molecules. Functional doctors don't play with dangerous molecules, okay? So that's already a completely different setting. Well, of course, you know, it could go on, but what do you think about this answer?
I like that answer a lot. I think that's incredibly clear in terms of the main difference between how, conventional practitioners practice and those in functional medicine practice, obviously having a huge emphasis on the natural approach and, you know, more risk averse. And I think that what you said about teaming up with the patient, I think is so important, because
important.
as a patient, it can feel sometimes as though we are somehow an accessory to whatever's the healthcare that we're receiving.
Yeah, that's annoying. Well, something. Well, these problems exist with mainstream approach in all countries. What comes to my mind at this moment is a French example, and it's easy. It's very obvious how insane and how insulting and how outrageous this kind of comment from the doctor is. Because in France, you have these studies, college that ends with baccalaureate, okay, which you call bac, okay. We don't have that here in Luxembourg, and we don't have it in Belgium either, but bac. And then, of course, if you embark in medical school, I did 7 years, now it's 6 years. I did 7 years in my time, but now it's 6 years. And if you want to be a GP, you have 2 more years. So, and of course, this was a comment made by an endocrinologist, and they do 4 years after the 6 years to become endocrinologists, because they are specialized consultants, if you want. So they would call that back plus 10 years. And when a patient comes up with some question, but innocent question, because the patient knows a bit, has been educated by a functional doctor into, some potential concerns from the classic approach, or perhaps alternative path that could exist, etc. But very, very carefully, there's no way you're going to insult, knowledge doctors because you've read a book in functional medicine or you're dealing with a functional doctor. That would be as outrageous. But the guy, stops her and tells her, I don't think you're back plus 10. Okay. So you're an idiot. I've studied, 10 years for that. I know, and you don't. But that's not how it should be. But, I understand both points of view. What is maybe missing in this definition, importantly, would be that functional medicine is always going to be interested in the root cause, tries to understand it, and as much as possible to fix it. Mainstream medicine, not at all. Not interested. Because that doesn't fit the paradigm where you have one symptom, one diagnosis, and one chemical to solve the problem, which works in certain cases. And I like when that works on a short term, because then you almost tick all the boxes, almost, because the chemical thing that comes at the end, you don't know if you're going to have side effects or not. But if it works, you don't have side effects, nobody's going to complain. But the problem is that most of the things functional doctors are dealing with, if it's not prevention, because of course that's a big point, and for you personally was a big part of it. But of course we have more demands of helping with this or with that, or finding another approach, because the mainstream approach is not helping, or has downsides and has side effects, delivers side effects. There's not one symptom. This concept where you go to the GP. I found that so maddening that I in a few years ago, when I was working in London, almost full time, I would not dare telling my European colleagues that most of GP practices were so overwhelmed that there was an instruction, sometimes written in the waiting room, you can only discuss one symptom at a time, you have to come back to discuss another symptom. It is such a nonsense that I never really dared telling that to people on this side, because I thought, they're going to laugh at me and think that I'm making myself, funny or special or, a bit, interesting. But it has started here as well now, it is starting here as well. Yeah, you can only they don't have time to deal with more than one symptom. But I mean, most of the problems have more than one symptom. So how does the patient, separates, disentangle the symptoms and presents one, and that gives a drug, and then, but let's say 3-4 symptoms are connected, and then you give one at a time, you pay 4 visits. Well, you don't pay in the UK. Here you pay something, which is probably an idea for not completely bankrupting the whole thing. You pay something, except if you have very low income. If you have very low income, you don't pay at all. But if you have a decent income or a very good income, you pay something, 15, 20 pounds, which is affordable for most people, not for all, and those here, they don't pay either. But well, that's another discussion. But what is crazy would be to be obliged to disentangle 4 symptoms that are all linked together, that pinpoint to something, which could be a low thyroid function, constipated, depressed, hair fall, and I don't know, heavy bleeding, in periods. They all can be connected. They are not necessarily connected, but they can easily be connected to a low thyroid function. And you're going to go 4 times and give each time, and then you have 4 drugs to fix all the. I mean, it's frightening to be there. And that is the paradigm. The paradigm in functional medicine, an appointment takes minimally half an hour if you are on a small budget. Ideally, you come with a bit more budget and you have a whole 1-hour appointment. You explore everything and you try to find if there are connections, and you decide which tests should be run to understand what is wrong and what is the root cause. You don't put a plaster on the wound. Your goal is to heal the wound, and then there's no need for a plaster. Now, of course, you may have to give a plaster in the meantime, which could be, why not, sometimes chemical, ideally a bit safer, a bit more natural if possible. Or perhaps you ask the patient to be patient because, well, it's not completely counterintuitive to ask the patient to be patient. Let's say, okay, look, we're going to work on the cause. Bon, take it easy. We're going to improve that. It's going to take some weeks, perhaps some months. Well, that's possible. But for God's sake, you work at the wound. You don't invent sophisticated, sometimes super high-tech plasters. But what about the mess that is underneath? Voilà, that's another definition of functional medicine.
I love it. There's so many.
No, but it's a vast, it's a vast domain, because, of course, you could also see a whole different approach, even beyond intestinal health, but still connected. I'm going to say why, which would be, and that's been very much in the recent concerns, with a pandemic and with, of course, the strange strategy that has been completely focused on killing or avoiding the virus rather than on strengthening the patient's immune defenses, immune system. Okay. So that's the pandemic. But generally speaking, a lot of problems will be avoided if you have a stronger immunity. Okay. And I think that for your community, of course, that is very relevant. Huh? And you will remember, I'm going to openly disclose something that I'm not sure you want me to confess on your behalf, that you were asking me, but why would, what was the question? Why would functional medicine be useful for your community, MEN1, or assimilated genetic backgrounds? Because your immune system gets stronger. You know, when you fix all sorts of things that are a bit out of whack, your immune system gets stronger. Alors, would it be cancer prevention? Would it be winter infections prevention? Would it be all sorts of, you know, we still have a lot of medical interventions needed to deal with infections of all sorts. They haven't disappeared. We are better at dealing with them than a century ago, but they are still there. They're still attracting a lot of, you know, costs, and if that can be squeezed down, well, you know, it's the big thing. Well, I always say as well, which is maybe slightly biased, but I think it's still true, that if the system was magically switched from mainstream approach to functional approach, what I'm doing, you would allow the NHS to invest in Qatar for some, you know, drilling and find more gas, because, you know, they would not know what to do with all these billions. There's a lot of that money is spent on things that could be prevented, and of course, especially by educating patients about their diets, because, you know, that's a gigantic problem, and I will dare saying, especially in the UK, it's everywhere, but, you know, in the UK, it's dramatic when you see the level of, you know, obesity and diabetes and pre-diabetes. You know, it's sad, because, you know, there's a lack of focus on working ahead of, because once these patients are really morbidly obese, they cost a fortune every month, every year, and it's all paid by NHS, and this is really heading into a wall. So functional medicine pretends to deal with all these things if we have the patient's collaboration, because of course the patient is there, wants the magic bullet. Well, then nothing's going to happen on my side. Then go to the other approach and help people. I'm not against helping people. Some people just have not been educated to something as sophisticated as what we recommend. Now, you could always imagine some light versions of little things, you know, little gains. So there's still room, but bon, maybe not everyone would even understand. You know, people are in pain, they just want a painkiller. Well, they're depressed, they want an antidepressant. Well, then what am I going to say? Looking at what they are eating when we have this discussion, but yeah, but, you know, if it's not going to change, what's the point?
Absolutely. There's a lot of, I suppose, agency on the part of the individual. And without that education, without that awareness, then how are we supposed to know, you know, what's within our remit and what we can do, rather than always looking at what we can't do or what someone else's responsibility to fix? So,
but I have a question for you now, Lizzie. What do you think that in your community, because of the concerns, that people would be a bit more open to look into what they eat, what they do, etc.? Perhaps.
Hugely, they are. They're already asking questions because um, obviously we, through the NHS, we have the most amazing endocrine care, but it's
Yeah, yeah, I
very,
saw it. I saw it.
very
I am
specifically,
100% on it. You know that. I
yeah,
say it each time. It's
you do,
impressive. It's impressive, and it gives
you
a
do.
much better perspective of NHS than the mess you see in emergency service. Where it's really, you wonder in which part of the world you are. So you
Absolutely.
have this dual thing, and
Yeah,
that has to be stressed. Yes, of course.
it does acknowledge, and definitely I have come to appreciate so much, the quality of care I have. But it's specialized, that's endocrine. They don't look at anything else. So if I go to my consultant and I say, and I have done, and I've said, what do you think about gut or diet? They say very honestly, don't know, don't know about anything like that. And that is not the answer that people in my community want to be listening to, because they want to know what they can do,
Yeah, yeah.
to help themselves. And that's why, yes, I think the answer to your question is yes, there's a huge incentive at the moment, particularly post COVID, for people to become more aware, to educate themselves, and to start making changes on the level of, their general health, which actually we don't know doesn't have something to do with MEN1 as well. Maybe that it will take thousands and thousands of years for the science and the evidence to back it up completely. But as you say, just something about, the immune system, knowing that actually how important it is to have a strong immune system with MEN1. Well, that's going to be the most amazing news to people when they hear it, because they wouldn't have known that before. They wouldn't have got that information. So it's incredibly valuable.
It makes me willing to offer this example or this analogy somewhere, which is absolutely authentic and very easy to prove or to hear about. It's a woman in her 50s who brutally loses her partner. Okay. It happens, cardiovascular, sudden cardiac death, or an accident, or whatever. And it comes out of the blue. It's absolutely dramatic. Very well. Let's not say very often. I'm going to frighten some people, but it is absolutely not surprising to see those women 6 months later, when self-examining their breasts to feel a growth, and find out that it is a breast cancer. Alors bon, at least there it's obviously quite early, so let's say that's going to be well taken care of, etc. But the cancer was there. It doesn't get to something that you feel with your fingers in 6 months. That doesn't exist. It was there. It was very small, and it was dormant. And it wakes up because with this massive shock, your immune system crashes, and then it starts growing because you don't contain it. That's it. I mean, this I've come across a number of these cases. This is pretty common, because the immune system keeps all those little cancers that we all have, at least from a certain age. Well, at your age, you really need to recruit crazy genes to have the taste of those things. Normally it's for further down in life, but it's the same problem. You don't want these things to happen. Would you be 20, 30, or 50, 60? And prostate is even better example, because we think that very old men all have some prostate cancer cells if they have a good immune system, if they enjoy their lives, if they have a good diet, if they have a good digestive capacity, if everything functions well, you would find that in an autopsy, but it would never show up. So, of course, immunity is key.
fascinating. Yeah, it's honestly fascinating, and I think a lot of people won't know that. I didn't know it until I met you, so thank you for sharing that.
Well, you know, interestingly, look, I followed a bit of a strange path. Very early in my career, I did a bit of allopathic medicine, so I know what it is, and I had some really nice satisfactions with that, but also big failures, because when you treat tonsillitis, you know, for an 8-year boy, schoolboy, with your antibiotics, and you know it's miraculous. The next day, the mother calls you, say, "Oh, perfect. He doesn't feel anything more. He was in, you know, crying because it can be very painful, especially tonsillitis." And then you say, "Hooray!" But if 1 month later you're called again to go for a home visit, that was a time where we did much more home visits. Okay. Which gave you an idea of family medicine as well, because you could see a lot of things, you know, in the homes, which sometimes did matter and had to be sort of managed a bit better to move on. Well, that's another story. That's family medicine, which I love. Even though I don't do home visits, but you know, well, especially with Zoom appointments, you know, you are more in the homes than before, which sometimes is interesting. But to come back to this case, you're called again 1 month later with exactly the same problem. You have to give, what are you going to give? The same antibiotic, another one? I mean, that starts to, you know, and when it goes on and on, you say, well, you know, there's something wrong in this. And of course, I started thinking, but maybe this boy has iron deficiency, or maybe he has a vitamin D deficiency, or both together. And then there's no way you antibiotics are the solution. The solution is to give him back iron and vitamin D. You know, that's functional medicine. Again, it's another definition. If you want a shorter one to squeeze in your, you know, in your program, that's the shortest one. But then for personal reasons, I moved a lot into sports medicine, and progressively, you know, top level sports medicine. And there, your immunity is the key, because the more fit you are, the more weak you are in terms of immune defenses. And so during that period of my career, which lasted 15 years or so, 15 years, you have the time to experiment and to understand and to find out. I came out of that sequence really efficient to boost immune defenses. And that is massively through intestinal health. Because that has been my answer to your question. How can functional medicine help, you know, my MEN1 community and others with similar concerns? Well, of course, with good gut, good immunity. And that I learned from top-level athletes, cyclists, swimmers, triathletes, etc., individual sports. Because in team sports, you know, when you fail, you always blame the others, you know, who have been ridiculously, appealingly weak. You don't blame yourself. So I like individual sports because you are facing the facts. But so I came into full-blown functional medicine for anyone, family, children, women, elderly, business people, highly stressful lives. London City has been a big, interesting, of course, experience, and I've indulged a lot into that one. Immunity remains a big asset, but then of course, you know, you expand in well-being, in prevention, in well-aging. I'm not really anti-aging. I really don't like that label, but of course, you know, if you fix everything in your environment, which means your sleep, your diet, your your physical activity, etc. Or fix is maybe a big word, but if you improve all those things, but of course you age better, and ideally without conditions. I'm not a bad example. I haven't had X-ray since my military service 40 years ago, where they X-rayed my chest to make sure I would not be, suffering from TB. But that's 40 years ago. I haven't had any other X-ray except perhaps teeth. I don't take any medication, I haven't seen the only doctor I have seen in the last 30 years is the one who gave me the COVID injection. I only had one, by the way, because that was enough here to manage to keep working. So yeah, that's of course where we have a lot of aggressivity from big pharma, because of course if a lot of people start doing that, that's not going to be good for the shares of big pharmaceutical companies, because they're going to sell less. They're still going to be needed to sell, but then they won't keep growing. They will face a drop in the demand in some of the things they make, but now they could make other things that are needed. There's no way I would like to, especially in your case, when I see the care you have from this mainstream approach, it is superb. Sometimes you need a drug, which I fully endorse. We are not going to go into any specifics, but of course, nobody's going to be surprised. And then it's magic. What this drug does, I can't do that with functional medicine, but I probably can do things that they can't do. And they're very honest in their answer, saying, we don't know what you should be eating. That's an honest answer. That's great. What is disgusting is when, they have this face, set bad face, and they say, all of that is BS. That is not fair. That still enrages me. I shouldn't enrage, because I've heard that, not necessarily directly, but, through patients. And, that's completely unacceptable. But if they say, I don't know, that's not my field, that's a very good answer.
That's fascinating. And leads us quite nicely onto, in a final few minutes, I have some questions that have come in specifically from members of the community who want to find out more about what they can do from a sort of gut health functional medicine point of view. So the first question is,